Hello and welcome back to AWS on Air here at reInvent 2020, where I'm back with you to complete today's roundup with a fantastic interview that I've been so looking forward to since last week. We are here to talk industry live with Pat from our Life Sciences team. Pat, why don't you tell us a bit about what you do here at Amazon and a bit more about Life Sciences?
Sure. Well, thank you, MJ. My role here is that I'm the head of technology for healthcare and life sciences at AWS. And in my position, I really get a kind of a cool place where I sit in between a lot of our field-facing technical organizations, different resources out there, SAs, TAMs, and all of them, and our engineering and service teams here at AWS. And so get to apply the lens of the vertical to all the developments back and forth across that interface.
So needless to say, a pretty busy man. I just got off air with Rudy, who I know is excited to see what you're going to tell us today. So from Rudy to yourself, Pat, why don't you tell us a bit more, expand a bit on what life sciences means to you
Sure.
and to AWS?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, it is actually combined with healthcare. So often the way you see it referred to as HCLS, or healthcare and life sciences. But within the life sciences segment, or that side of those four letters, we really cover or focus very intently on three segments within that. First one is really medical devices, and that's inclusive of things, any type of medical device out there. And so, customers who produce things like implantables, but also, more traditional medical devices that people think of when they think, when they're in a hospital or something like that. And then even wearables that can be used as in a medical context. And the next segment that we have is biopharma, that we refer to it as biopharma, really all biotechs and pharmaceutical companies that produce therapeutics and vaccines and new developments in support of human health. And then the last segment that we have is what we call research. And what that is really anything that is sort of just the pure science-focused aspects of what we do. So things like customers that work exclusively in genomics or with technologies that build out X-ray crystallography or electron microscopy, or these different technologies that can be utilized to advance research for human health. And I'm part of a wider virtual team across AWS that that really helps kind of bring this all together for our customers here. And we have everybody from physicians and radiologists and researchers of all stripes from across healthcare and life sciences, through to folks like myself who specialize primarily in high performance computing and research computing, and did so mostly within biopharma before coming to AWS. So it's a really terrific organization.
It sounds like, and it's really cool to see technology at the center of all that and bringing all of these different roles and fits together, Pat. So with that, I know a lot of people are joining in to hear specifically from you today. Why don't you talk us through some of the biggest challenges that the healthcare and life sciences sector are seeing right now?
Sure. Keeping in mind that right now is a special time, it has been a special time for all of us. Some of the things that we're seeing now are really just highly emphasized or exaggerated versions of what we've been seeing all along. The biggest thing among them, or the biggest challenge that everybody seems to face, is really timely access to what we consider to be necessary resources. Often what you find is that despite the long development cycles of different things in the life sciences, access to data or essential data or very critical events and event data is sometimes very limited and also time bound. And so it's critical to have the right resources to apply to this data at the right time. When we look at arrangements, from different biobanks and things, where significant amounts of patient data are kept, like the
Yeah.
UK Biobank, what they do is open up a significant amount of access to that data, but only for a limited period of time to different commercial partners and things.
Yeah. Security being job zero there, Pat.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, and so we want to make sure that those partners of organizations like the UK Biobank have access to exactly what they need when they need it, because there's no later in a lot of these cases,
Right. That's right.
eventually. And so, what you see is a lot of things where we try to focus on building out the right resources in the right places, and new introductions, new announcements that we've had over the past few weeks and reInvent, like for our HPC instances, an instance class, have been really critical to support that. Then, the other, aspect of that, of course, is very much related, which is the speed to market, which the pressure that they face in order to get to market quickly. Um, when we're dealing with a lot, like developing a lot of therapeutics and things like that, this is a process that often takes many, many years. And,
Yeah.
sometimes I think that, people aren't aware, looking from the outside in, that typical therapeutic or something that's used maybe for treatment of cancer or something like that can take more than a decade from initial conception to commercial release. And this is, of course, along the way, it's not that they don't want to move faster and more quickly, but it's they're, everybody's limited by the ability to work through the data that they have to gather that data in the first place, to test for safety, to test for efficacy across that time period. And so, whatever we do is really meant to help support our customers and remove any kind of unnecessary barriers along the way, so that they're not interrupted anywhere along that period, and
Absolutely.
slow down their progress in getting to market. Um, and I think what you're seeing now, especially in the last year, is the realization of a lot of those efforts, like the AWS customer Moderna, who
Yeah.
have been working on one of the vaccines for COVID-19. Uh, we partnered with them very closely to develop a lot of capability for them to do that rapidly and effectively across that, and make sure that we could help them get a vaccine out in the time that they did, which, by the way, is one of those kind of medical miracles that I hope we'll be able to
Indeed.
see again. Um, when you look at the development time for vaccines, there's actually an interesting chart that shows how this is reduced to now less than a year, but it traditionally or typically has been something that also took 6 to 8 years on average. And then the last kind of thing that we see is that it's still, a big challenge for everybody is maintaining the quality and rigor that they have in their manufacturing processes and things, and working with the related challenges that you often see in supply chain and distribution across the industry. So, when we look at improvements that we've been announcing to help manufacturing improve the quality of goods overall. We hope that a lot of these developments can be applied to our customers in the life sciences also, who is obviously a significant amount of manufacturing, but at a quality bar that's probably much higher than what most people even are aware of. And these organizations are also highly regulated, so it's something that we have to be very mindful of as we work with them, to make sure that they are capable of answering to regulators and governments around the world.
Absolutely. I think you touched on some really key areas there, Pat, that, when you think about it, the being able to develop at such a pace that you're talking about within a year, we're talking less than 12 months right now. And also having the capability to do so. It's pretty crazy. So I really appreciate you touching on that. Perhaps for the benefit of our audience, how about we reverse that and we see how the events of this last year have impacted life sciences?
Yeah, well, in a dramatic way. I think not only to just kind of tie into the last example with Moderna's technology was actually a net new technology overall,
Yes,
something that
it's
had
crazy.
been utilized. Yeah, it's awesome.
It wasn't just a pivot. You're absolutely right. It's net new.
Yeah, and so it wasn't just something that they were able to refashion and accelerate, but not
Yeah,
but innovate and accelerate at the same time. It's a tremendous achievement. But what has really impacted the last year has been the need to pull together resources and data very quickly to power really rapid research.
yeah,
At the beginning of the pandemic, what we saw was a lot of uh, hunger out there, and this incredible demand. It's something I've never really seen over my career, for data, for patient data,
yeah.
observational data.
The way we think about data, it's totally changed. You're absolutely right.
And it impacted us, because it kind of our customers and partners were now realizing that they didn't have this type of immediate access to quality data that they needed. And so, AWS, we worked to try and pull together as much data as we could, make it publicly available, and things like the COVID-19 data lake example. But then there's also that we did with other strategic partners like Cerner,
Hmm.
who are just publicly traded medical records company in the world, and to pull together that data into an analysis environment that they could utilize free and effectively, called the Healthy Data Lab for COVID-19. Um, but then the other aspect of that, or the other impact that we've seen, has been this need for real global collaboration, right?
Yeah,
The desire for everybody to source data from regions that were uh, adversely affected at first, and be able to pull that into research efforts that were taking place around the world.
yeah,
And then, in a related sense, there was, with the shutdowns, with the constraints that were put into place, there were a lot of interruptions to the supply chain for even critical therapeutics that are part of, people's everyday lives, especially those with chronic conditions and things. And so, um, we worked hard with our customers to try and mitigate those impacts and help them out and apply a lot of what even all of Amazon was able to understand about operating a supply chain, but to their existing processes and things. And then the third real impact that we've seen has been now this real leap forward in terms of what we call what we call patient services, which is, to put it in an easy to relate way. When this came out, it was so unknown and poorly understood that somehow many people, and I'm not faulting anybody for this, but many people felt it necessary to call a pharma
sure.
and try and understand what it was and whether or not they had it, and how their pets were affected and things. And so what we tried to do, but there's more to it than that, right? There's the need for the continuation of people who are on clinical trials. This is far more critical, and not as humorous when you're in a clinical trial and you can no longer go see your physician.
Yeah,
So how do we continue the care of people who are in these trials and not interrupt the process of gathering data to support the efforts of our commercial partners? And so we worked very closely with a number of these partners to modernize their communication systems, the way that they were able to gather data. If you take a look at a lot of efforts that we did with Amazon Connect and deployments that we did with a number of customers all the way across, and then kind of related to that, efforts that we also built out within telemedicine and healthcare to try and tie those together and bring them to the patient services area. This was something that was had a tremendous impact, because now as we go into the next year, we have modernized patient services available across every commercial partner who work with AWS. And
More
so,
optimized
mm,
communication. Yeah, absolutely.
so hopefully, it won't be as widely needed as it is now. But when it is now something that's available. Um, so those are some of the big impacts there.
Massive impacts. It's pretty amazing when you just took a couple of minutes there to really kind of dive into such a massive area, and it's really eye opening to hear it put in that way, Pat. So why don't we move on to 2021? Who knows what 2021 is going to have in store for any of us right now? You just mentioned the massive change in patient records from communications and where we can help and where we've had to pivot. We haven't had a choice, right? What do you see as the important items as we move into whatever 2021 is going to look like?
Well, I think, even though, I suggested that everything is completely modernized, there's still to be made
Still a lot
to,
of work to do, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
The changes that we've all experienced in the way that we work and the way that we even, uh, you know, obtain things, goods and services outside, or anything, has changed so dramatically that we'll still have to adapt the things in that patient services area to accommodate the way people really live now, right? And so, we're uh, always looking at ways to, innovate, but also really simplify the process of that people have to go through to obtain, expert advice, or information about the safety of vaccines, or things like that.
yeah.
So, what we're going to be focusing on are better ways to communicate with patients worldwide through these types of patient services. And then, another thing is what people are witnessing now as things like these vaccines work their way through regulatory review, is also in something of like if there's an equivalent, a regulatory miracle, right? That they are putting an incredible amount of, if there is,
I like
trademark. If the difficulty of reviewing a lot of this is just the sheer amount and mountain of is primarily around the mountain of data that comes in, and sorting through that data to determine the true safety and efficacy of a therapeutic or a vaccine is complex, right? And it's a daunting task. And so we're seeing we'll continue to work with regulators, to work with industry bodies to try and
okay.
do the best we can to streamline that process and make it a little bit more accessible to everybody. But also, the other challenge that we see going forward beyond COVID is that
Yeah.
as we work with our customers in this area, we see the development of sort of narrower and narrow, or therapeutics with narrower and narrower application, which isn't to say that the big diseases are all solved, but that uh, as you personalize the healthcare of people, as you draw back into that more what's sometimes termed as precision medicine, you derive a more precise application for a therapeutic for a patient, but that necessarily means that you're talking about a smaller set of patients. And so, the complexity of reaching those patients, identifying them, identifying the pathways of whatever is affecting them, and trying to work what you can to cure or mitigate their condition, is becomes more and more complex, the sort of more constrained it becomes, right? And so on the
Yeah.
one hand, you have this need for a mountain of data, and on the other hand, you have this very narrow application that is going through, and regulators are left a little bit hungry for more information in order to support the applications, right? And so this is an area that we're going to focus on very heavily in 2021, in the next year, because it's just something that's going to be a real significant issue going forward from now on. And then, of course, I think the last thing is that we all worked and everybody who contributed to the efforts of, not just maintaining um, our countries and everything and all of our essential infrastructure, but developing these treatments and the vaccines and all of our healthcare workers and everything. We worked at an astonishing pace. The
Amazing.
pace has, yeah, but frankly, that pace has been a terrific, obviously, a terrific event for humanity in terms of the pace of developments of vaccines and things like that. And so we'd like to do what we can to focus on helping our customers maintain that pace without burning anybody out or destroying everybody, right? But
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
but maintain that pace of development, right? The next time we need to develop a vaccine very quickly, it shouldn't be any longer than this process, right? That's what we hope, right?
That's a great call out, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we'd like to do what we can to help support them. So going into 2021, maybe a lot of the things that we stood up as temporary mechanisms in this year, we'll try to make them into permanent features or permanent mechanisms next year.
Absolutely. It's crazy to think about, maybe if we're here, you and I back interviewing this time next year, just what we'll be talking about, right? So you mentioned a few key areas there, Pat. One being accessibility, and we do really need to concentrate on that. Different people around the world need access to different data. How we're going to help with that. You mentioned personalization, which has been a massive theme of reInvent this year. So it's really cool to touch on that. But in terms of, us bringing the technology to the table and how we help, the most important thing, our AWS customers, what do you see as being innovative, collaborative next year in 2021, where we can actually, get in there and help?
Well, I think the biggest challenge across healthcare and life sciences is, um, like I mentioned earlier, the access to data and patient data, especially,
Yeah,
and observational data and things like that. And also, not just the literal access to it, but access to quality data. Often a problem is that, um, data is recorded across the world by different providers and things like that is often uneven, is to put it politely, across, across the world. And so,
very slightly.
yeah. And so what you'll see more of, and what AWS is working very hard on is, for example, a lot of the things that we're doing within, for AI and ML within healthcare.
Mm,
One of the releases that we had yesterday was for Amazon Health Lake, which is really meant to be a um, I don't want to say central, but a kind of the data lake, for healthcare data and patient data that's
yes,
kind of normalized and pulled together in a FHIR-based format. And FHIR is one of the interoperability standards, fast healthcare interoperability resources that is used widely across the world. And so by doing that and bringing it together and making it immediately accessible, any data that's in there and pulled together and into Health Lake, making that data immediately accessible for use within SageMaker and other tools that we have, give everybody the power to do really
yeah,
significant analysis really quickly on data that they know is already quality or brought to a common quality bar, um, and so can produce more valuable insights more quickly that way without having to spend a lot of time doing a lot of hammering on bad data. um, and then, it kind of related to some of the other things that we have talked about. What we're looking at is like I may have mentioned earlier, trying to adapt things that we utilize often in other areas. For example, a lot of the Lookout and Panorama, the things that we've
yeah,
used for use within manufacturing, especially, and seeing where we can adapt those for use in the life sciences. And
perfect.
yeah, and yeah, it may take a little bit more work because, like I said, the bar is a little bit higher and sometimes a little bit difficult to reach. But
As
um,
it should be.
yeah, I mean, but it's a challenge, and we're happy to work on it with our customers and try to bring them the best value that we can with a lot of the services that we produce. That, you
Well,
know,
we're very lucky to have you at the helm of that, Pat, and I can't wait to see what you and the team come up with next. But tell me, let's get personal for a minute, right? What are you, Pat, looking forward to as we close out the crazy year that has been 2020?
I think like a lot of people, getting out of this office, this little box has been, and it's you can't tell from looking at me, but I think it's starting to kind of smell weird and stuff like that. Uh, I think that I really look forward, though, I mean, to seeing my family, my friends, and my colleagues, and everything, and peers, across the industry and everything, so that we can get to work together again instead of just sort of doing this virtually. I hope that we can have this conversation in person next year.
Fingers
Uh,
crossed.
yeah, but this is where the pandemic has probably highlighted for us, in a very clear way, not only the what works, right, which are a lot of the things that we utilize to help our customers develop, vaccines and therapies, but also what doesn't work, right? And this is this
Yes.
and so this is what I'm really looking forward to, is being able to kind of toss out a lot of ideas that we already know,
Yeah,
um,
that's exactly right.
right, they failed. So so excited for that.
That's what we do here, right? We experiment. It doesn't matter if we fail, we
Yep.
find the next experiment to go for. I love that, Pat. What a good way for us to finish here. So, if any of you have missed this interview with Pat from our healthcare and life sciences team, please jump online, find it, watch it. It has been so interesting for me. I could literally sit here and talk to you all day, as I'm sure our viewers are also thinking about. So, Pat, before we wrap up here, where can our viewers go to find out more about some of the things you've been talking about today?
So we have a really nice homepage. Um,
If you do say so yourself.
yeah. So if I do say, which I had nothing to do with the design, but I think, at AWS, it was awsamazon.com/health. Um,
Great.
and
Nice
then
and
you,
easy.
yeah, and then you can always, from there, be able to kind of link to all of our different, workloads, solutions, quick starts, references, all kinds of things like that. And then, if you want to be able to watch a lot of the sessions, I think I know that we have a life sciences attendee guide for reInvent that
We
pulled them
do.
all, lists out the different things that we've got. So it's a long URL. We'll find a good way. But if you just search for reInvent, life sciences attendee guide, you'll be able to find it easily. And then, lastly is that, um, you know, anything on AWS, all the way across, we are HCLS. If you just search for that, use that term as your search term,
HCLS. Got it.
HCLS, you will find, roles across our V team. You will find,
Fantastic.
you will find, case studies, information, useful things that you can, use in your everyday, job, whether or not you're in the industry. We're happy to have everybody kind of come and take a look. So we
Speaking
do.
of access, thank you so much, Pat. I really, really appreciate you joining me today on AWS On Air. You heard it from the man himself. Go and have a look, HCLS, or stay tuned for our localized recaps. We are coming at you in 10 different languages this year. So that is coming up after this. In the meantime, Pat, thank you once again for joining us. Can't
Yeah.
wait to see what you come up with next year. And for now, stay tuned for our recaps. See you all next week. Thank you.